The stars did not scream when they died. They simply faded, quietly, like the last breath of a dream remembered by no one. One by one, they winked out across the silent void, leaving only cinders where once they had burned with a fury that shamed gods. In the far edges of the galaxy, where the skeins of time hang like torn veils, the stars had dimmed in reverence, not to the passage of ages, but to something far older, colder, and more patient than time. The galaxy was not yet young, but it was not old either. It was in its long dusk, where empires began to rot from within, even as they reached out with golden hands to grasp more worlds. And in that hour, beneath the skin of the universe, something ancient stirred, not life, but memory. The kind of memory that gnaws on the soul long after the body has forgotten it. In the tomb complex of Morlek, buried under the ash rivers of the planet Harkaris, a sarcophagus older than Terra's oceans lay dormant. Cables like necrotic veins pulsed weakly, drawing energy from decayed reactors. The tomb's architecture was a geometry of impossible angles, designed not for function, but for reverence, as if reality itself bent in mourning around its slumbering occupant. Then, light, cold, green, unholy light. The sarcophagus stirred. A hiss like the sigh of the dead echoed through the halls. The runes flared, and from within the darkness it emerged. The being who rose was no longer of flesh, though once he had worn it like armor. His body gleamed with necrodermis, metal forged not in stars, but in hatred of them. His name, long scoured from the minds of mortals, was Sahekra. In life he had been a prince of the Saracen dynasties, a seer warrior and philosopher general. In death, he was something more, or less. Even he could no longer tell. He opened his eyes, and they did not blink. They glowed, green and eternal. All across the sector, tombs responded. Chains of command older than any Xeno species flickered to life. Tomb worlds woke from their aeon-long sleep with a hum like the heartbeat of titans. The galaxy would not feel it yet, but something had shifted. A shadow was unfolding. And yet, even as command subroutines unfurled within his mind, even as war plans billions of years old loaded into his consciousness with the cold elegance of a machine god's will, he hesitated. The hesitation was not a malfunction. It was a memory, not of war, of betrayal. A flicker, less than a millisecond, showed him the face of the silent king, once lord, once savior, once friend. He remembered kneeling beside him beneath the obsidian spires of Triarch Prime, swearing allegiance to the war to end all suffering. He remembered the oath, to save our people, even if it costs us our souls. It had cost more. Sahekra turned slowly. Before him, in the sanctum chamber, stood a single figure, draped in rags of tattered ceremonial gold. The cryptek known as Anrakel the Remnant. Ancient even before biotransference, Anrakel was no longer certain if he served knowledge or madness. "You have awoken," the cryptek whispered. His voice was dry, like the husks of forgotten stars. The protocols responded. The galaxy burns again. "Does it live still?" Sahekra asked. His voice was a hollow echo, carried more in the mind than in air. The pact, the promise, the empire we bled for. Anrakel's silence was his answer. Sahekra did not move. He simply stared into the dark beyond the chamber walls, where static maps of galactic void still pulsed with the green haze of Necron command protocols. He had expected as much, but expecting a wound does not spare one from the pain of its reopening. "Then we rise not for glory," he murmured, "but for vengeance." There it was, first conflict, not with the galaxy, not with the scurrying vermin who dared call themselves kings and gods, but within, a war of purpose. For what did an immortal machine fight when all it had known had rotted beneath the weight of time, when the Empire was ash and the stars were dying? Unrakal moved closer, his skeletal hands folded in mockery of prayer. The others will awaken soon. Many still believe. Others remember. And some, my lord, still dream. Of what? The cryptek did not answer. Instead, he gestured toward the ancient archive vaults. They would find answers there, or at least ghosts. Sahekra turned from him, descending the broken stair of the command dais. His every step echoed like the tolling of funereal bells. Reignite the beacons, he said. Let the other dynasties see that Morlech rises once more. And the others? Anrakel asked quietly. The ones who have changed. A pause. They will kneel, Sahekra answered, or they will burn. Even the dead must choose. Far above the tomb world, the stars pulsed faintly in the void. A signal, long dormant, was cast into the galactic dark. A single pulse of code, spoken in the ancient tongue of the Necrontyr, reborn in the voice of a dead god. I have awoken, and I remember. The old war machine had stirred, but it hadn't yet decided what it would become, and in that indecision, galaxies would fall. He remembered the sky, not as it was now, black and silent, choked with the dust of fallen moons, but as it had once been, when he still bore flesh, a sky of copper storms and dying light, where twin suns bled over rust-coloured oceans and cities scraped the heavens. He remembered the breeze, the scent of charged air before a storm. It had meant something then, meant life, change. Now it was only memory, brittle and useless. In the time since Sahekra's awakening, the tomb world of Harkaris had begun to shudder and stir, like an ancient beast feeling the weight of limbs long atrophied. Core reactors flared back into pallid life, their energies feeding through neural relay conduits into the buried legions beneath the surface. Warriors, tens of thousands, stood silently in their sarcophagi, waiting for a command not yet given. But Sahekra gave no order. He walked alone through the memory vaults. Each step echoed with the sound of something trying not to be remembered. Rusted statues of his ancestors lined the vast halls, faces chiseled in idealized Necrontyr symmetry, eyes stern and mournful. He did not look at them. He knew their judgments by heart. Still you seek solace in ghosts, came a voice from the shadows behind him. Calm, cold, familiar. Sahekra did not turn. I seek understanding. You will find neither here. The figure emerged from the gloom, a tall, lean form of burnished metal and obsidian black armor, bearing a blade of crackling phase energy at his hip. His eye sockets glowed with twin embers, and his bearing was that of a noble who had never quite shed the arrogance of life. Varektan, Sahekra murmured. Your blade brother once, the other replied. Before the oath, before the silencing. Now. He gestured toward the stillness. We are echoes in a dead world. Varektan had been one of the last to undergo biotransference, Sahekra remembered. He had resisted, as many had, and had killed to delay the process. But in the end, he had knelt, as they all had. The memory of his rebellion remained etched into his shell, a crack that no restoration had ever erased, running jagged along his collar like the scar of a broken crown. And yet you remain, Sahekra said, waiting, watching, for what? Varektan's eyes narrowed, to see if you would awaken a king or a ghost. The words hung in the air, heavy, measured. Sahekra turned at last and faced his old companion. Is that why you lingered here, Varek? To mock me? mind lingered to see if the last of us still remembered what it meant to choose. His voice dropped lower, more bitter. Not all of us chose this, and not all of us forgot. That word, forgot. It struck like a thunderbolt through Sahekra's core. He had not forgotten. He remembered the great chamber of decision, when the Satan, star gods and forms too vast for minds to grasp, offered salvation in their radiant lies. He remembered the flickering of doubt in the Silent King's eyes as the pact was sealed. He remembered the screams, the silence that followed, as minds were stripped from flesh and bound to cold eternity. And now they were all awake again, with no flesh, no hunger, no warmth, only remembrance. You question my purpose, Sahekra said low, yet you followed me here. Because even in madness, Varric said, some things are worth dying for. A long silence followed. In the shadows, Anrakel watched them both from the edge of the chamber, unmoving, unreadable. He knew what was being said without needing words. These two had once led empires of their own within the Sarkhan fold. Warriors, seers, rivals, and now they stood as relics beneath a dying star. You speak of death, Sahekra said at last, voice laced with quiet rage. We were denied that luxury. Varric drew closer, his eyes searching the polished skull of his old friend. Then what do you live for now? Sahekra turned to the center of the vault. There, in a suspended stasis field, hung a broken diadem, his ancestral crown, a symbol of unity. It had shattered in the war against the Old Ones, when the legions were scattered, and the Citan fed like beasts upon the stars. I live to remember, he said, so that I might know who to blame. Varric was silent. Anrakel stepped forward now, finally breaking his distance. The other dynasties have not all fared well. Some are fractured, some mad. Others have abandoned the old cause entirely. And you think I will unite them? Sahekra asked, bitter. I think, Anrakel said slowly, you are the only one who remembers what unity cost. A rumble echoed deep beneath their feet. The vault shook subtly, old systems awakening, gravitic plates locking into place. In the command spire above, the relay array turned toward the stars, scanning for signals. For answers, there were none, only static, and the slow, distant warble of time. Sahekra turned again to Varric. You asked if I woke as a king or a ghost. Perhaps I am both, but I will not walk blindly into another war. Then what will you do? I will find the Silent King. Anrakel's fingers froze mid-motion. Varric's eyes narrowed. He fled, Varric whispered. He left us. Because he remembered too much, Sahekra replied, and feared what we had become. No one has heard from him in 10 million years. Then I will be the first. Silence returned. The lights dimmed slightly, then pulsed brighter, a flickering heartbeat, mechanical and ancient. The machine spirit of Morlek had heard its master's voice. It did not yet know what he would become, but it listened, and far across the void, in the ruins of a lost empire, something stirred. The tombs were opening, but the dead did not rise for hope. They rose for memory, and memory, like rust, devours all. The stars were not dead. They merely watched, cold, unblinking, distant judges over a galaxy that no longer remembered its crimes. Sahekra stood within the command crypt of Morleg's orbital shrine, a shattered moon reassembled into a cathedral of circuitry and stasis vaults. He had not spoken in 3 cycles, not since the tomb world finished reawakening and the full horror of their loneliness became clear. There were no responses to their signal, no greetings, no warnings, no alliance, nothing. The The stars had not answered. The dynasties had not stirred. And in that silence, Sahekra felt the first chill of doubt pierce even his iron will. "You should not have expected welcome," Anrakel said beside him, his voice static thin. "Time has undone more than memory. It has broken meaning." "They are still Necron," Sahekra replied. "Still of the old blood." "Are they?" Anrakel turned to him slowly. "We all swore the same oath, and we all broke it in different ways." Sahekra said nothing. He stared into the hololithic display before them, stars marked in green fire, interstellar vectors rotating in silence. One signal flickered red, far to the galactic north. A dynasty, active, but the glyph was unknown, corrupted. "Who are they?" he asked. Anrakel's fingers twitched. "They call themselves the Dirgisworn now. Once they were the Akekit dynasty." Sahekra remembered them, stubborn, prideful, brutal. The Akekit had rejected diplomacy even in the days of flesh, but they had been loyal to the Saracen cause, at least until the war in heaven. "What became of their pharaoh?" "Unclear," Anrakel whispered. "He is called the Weeping Lord now. He speaks through silence and conducts war through dirges. It is said his tomb world never fully awoke, only wept." The command dais trembled. Energy surged through the chamber as void shields realigned and navigational runes sparked green. The vessel beneath them, shroud of mourning, was ready. "I will see them," Sahekra said. Varektan, silent until now, stepped forward. "They will not kneel." "I do not require obedience," Sahekra said, turning. "Only answers." "And if they give you madness instead?" "Then I will learn what becomes of a king who forgets his soul." The journey was long, not by mortal standards, but in silence. Even for immortals, there are silences that drag like chains. The shroud of mourning drifted through the black sea of the void, her hull a blend of obsidian plates and silver glyphs, etched in static-lit hieroglyphs. She was not fast. She was not designed for haste. The Necrons had all the time in the universe once. Inside, Sahekra stood alone in his sanctum. The walls whispered fragments of old memories, replayed in flickering pict sigils. His coronation, the signing of the Triarch Concordance, the first planetary cleansing in the war against the Old Ones. All victories, all meaningless now. He reached forward, brushing a hand across the hololith of his former self. He had been beautiful once, tall, lean, draped in regalia. A man. Now, he was only the shadow of purpose inside a shell of living metal. Anrakel's voice crackled through the chamber. "We approach the system. Hail has been issued." Response. "They sent a hymn." "A hymn?" "Yes." Translated. "It is a mourning song, a plea for silence." Sahekra's core grew colder. "Prepare to land." The world of Akekaris was wrong. It had once been a tomb world of burning silver and black glass, constructed atop the volcanic bones of a dead sun. But now it was veiled in ash. Endless clouds of grey mist, veining the sky like cracks in reality. The tomb structures remained, but twisted, bent under the weight of unknown energies. Towers drooped like mourning banners, and statues wept green vapours into the dust. The Necron legions that awaited them stood not in formation, but in rows of bowed heads, as if eternally praying. No sound, no motion, just stillness. At the centre of it all was the Lord. They called him the Weeping Lord. His form was massive, towering over all, wrapped in funerary cloaks of phase thread and bound relics. Where his eyes had once been, there were only streaming trails of green light. He did not move. He did not speak. But he sang. A low mechanical dirge emanated from his core. Not language, not command. Grief. It filled the air like poison. Sahekra approached with no guards, no retinue. Only Varric and Anrakil at his side. The weeping lord did not greet him. After a long moment, Sahekra spoke. Pharaon, I am Sahekra, of the Zarakan line. Once you served beside me under the banner of the Silent King. The Lord did not move. We awaken now into a galaxy of vermin and decay. Our kind lies scattered. We must remember our unity. Stillness. Sahekra stepped forward. You were Akek at once. What are you now? Then the Lord stirred. His voice was not speech. It was sound channeled through grief. A static warped whisper in Sahekra's mind. We are what remains when eternity forgets to die. Sahekra stood motionless. The voice was ancient, but broken, fragmented across time. The Lord lifted a hand barely, and a memory burst through Sahekra's mind like a spear. A world burning, Necron warriors tearing at each other's limbs, Khitan laughter echoing from the stars, and in the center, the Lord, on his knees, tearing out his own ocular implants as he screamed into the void. We remember too much. He spoke again, not aloud, but soul to soul. You seek to restore, but there is nothing left to restore. We are not kings. We are echoes. Let the silence rule. Sahekra's voice was iron. Then I will not kneel beside you. I will not mourn. I will build. The weeping Lord turned away, already vanishing into the fog. The audience was over. Sahekra stood in silence, the weight of decision settling over him. They will not follow, Varric whispered. He is gone. Sahekra nodded slowly. Then we leave the dead to their dirges, and we find the living. And as they turned to go, Anrakil asked softly, what if the living do not wish to be found? Sahekra looked up into the dark sky above Akikaris, where stars flickered like old eyes trying to remember. Then we remind them, he said, or we end them. The war had not yet begun, but the silence was breaking. The warp storms had cleared, not entirely, but just enough. The passage through the void was erratic, riddled with radiation scars and fractures in real space. But the beacons of the old Necron relay system blinked dimly through the dust. To the living, they were noise. To the awakened, they were echoes of command. Sahekra stood upon the observation platform of the Shroud of Mourning, his gaze fixed on the bruised planet below. Sargian Theta. It had once been a minor Necron outpost, barely more than a sentry node in the long, vanished Akotep trade routes. But now it pulsed with unfamiliar life, human life. The Imperium had claimed it, like a thief draping himself in the skin of a forgotten god. But it was not the Imperium's banners that stirred Sahekra's wrath. It was what lay beneath. Explain it again, he said, his voice a low growl over the transmission link. Anrakil's image flickered in the air beside him, his optics twitching as he replayed the data sigils. Deep beneath the crust, there is a vault, old but intact. Our sigils mark it as part of the pre-war beacon net. And the humans, mining blindly above it, they know nothing of what they sit upon, but their machines stir the echoes. Then why hesitate? Varric Tan's voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood at the edge of the platform, arms folded, eyes locked on the world below. We descend, we cleanse, we reclaim. Sahekra said nothing. His fingers rested on the edge of the control glyphs. Symbols lit beneath his hand, maps of energy fields, orbital defenses, scattered battle groups. The Imperium's presence was not large, but it was well armed. A small forge fleet from Ryza, Adeptus Mechanicus, judging by the signal encoding. A strange flicker passed through him. He had fought humans long ago, broken their steel hosts and shattered their warp things, but they had been nothing then. Crawling, primitive. Now they spread like rot. They build as we once did, he murmured. Varric turned. They build in ignorance, like carrion nesting in the ribcage of gods. Anrakel's voice was soft. Do you hesitate, my lord? Sahekra did not answer. He looked again at the human ships in orbit. Angular, brutal, efficient. They reminded him of Necrontia craft from the War of Subjugation. Functional, cold, made for conquest without beauty. The humans did not worship stars. They devoured them. How familiar. Prepare a surgical strike, he said at last. Minimal destruction. I want the vault intact. Varric bowed. At last the war stirs in you again. No, Sahekra said. This is not war. This is memory. The descent was swift. Green fire rained from the sky, monomolecular ghost beams lancing through the upper atmosphere like executioners' blades. Human ships screamed in binary pain as their reactors ruptured under precise volleys. Orbital relays went dark. Vox signals choked and died mid-prayer. The Adeptus Mechanicus had not come unprepared. Gun servitors lined the outer mining spires. Skitarii vanguards emerged in disciplined waves, chanting Binharic hymns as they opened fire into the green fog that swept across their world. But they were not facing flesh. They were facing memory-made metal. Necron warriors phased into existence in ranks of perfect symmetry, their bodies glowing with residual stasis heat. They did not shout. They did not chant. They walked through gunfire as if through dust. Blades hummed. Gauss flares disintegrated armor and bone alike. Varric led the forward ranks, his war scythe cleaving through a Mechanicus cohort with clinical efficiency. Sparks flew. Binary hymns turned to screams. Sahekra arrived only after the resistance had broken. He walked through the ruins in silence. The sky above was ash and smoke. The ground below trembled with the aftershock of orbital strikes. Mechanicus construct twitched on the ground. Half machine, half man. Neither able to scream any more. He reached the edge of the vault, the true purpose of the incursion. The entryway was still sealed. Anrakel moved forward, his fingers dancing across the ancient glyphs. The lock, it responds to your presence. Sahekra stepped toward it. The vault door hissed, trembling, then slowly slid open. Dust poured from the opening like sand through a broken hourglass. Inside, there was no treasure, no weapon, only a mirror. A great black slab of necrodermis, polished and smooth, suspended in the air by gravitic binders. Ancient inscriptions lined its edges, markings from the earliest Necrontia dynasties. This was not just a relay hub, it was a memory chamber. Sahekra approached. The surface shifted. His reflection appeared, not as he was now, but as he had been. Flesh, eyes, a man. You remember, Anrakel whispered behind him. Even now. I never forgot, Sahekra replied. His voice was soft, almost lost beneath the hum of the chamber. I see him. The man you were. The man I killed. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Sahekra turned away. Seal the vault. No other hands will touch this. Varric entered the chamber behind him, dragging the body of a high-ranking tech priest, half-slagged, barely clinging to life. Sahekra looked down at the thing. Its metal jaw twitched. Half of its face was machine. Why? The tech priest rasped. Why awaken? Sahekra crouched beside him. He did not answer at first, then softly, because we were told we could live forever. He rose, turned, and walked into the light. Above, the sky wept flame, and beneath, the dead remembered. On the bridge of the Shroud of Mourning, as they broke orbit and returned to the void, Sahek Ra stood alone again. The battle had been simple, clean, but within him, something churned. The humans' built-in ignorance fought with desperation, and yet he saw in their eyes what he no longer saw in his own reflection. Fear, the fear of death, the terror of the end. It was the one thing the Necrons no longer felt, and perhaps the one thing they had needed most. There was a world where even time had given up. The records called it Ulamenta, once a jewel in the crown of the Shenkanat dynasty. But that name had long been erased. The old data beacons called it Sector Null, a blind spot in the Necron relay net. No transmissions, no signals, just static, and the echo of something older than silence. Sahek Ra should have ignored it. He did not. The Shroud of Mourning drifted through the border of the null zone like a trespasser in a mausoleum. Stars here had gone cold without collapsing, hanging like dead eyes above a planet that no longer obeyed orbital decay. Gravity bent oddly. Time passed unevenly. On the bridge, Anrakel's optics flickered with distorted streams of ancient code. There is something wrong here. Define wrong, Variktan said flatly. The quantum echoes around the planet, 12 seconds out of phase with our own timeline. A spatial fracture. The planet exists, out of alignment. Still habitable. Barely. But there's power beneath the crust. A Necron beacon. Very old, but active. Sahek Ra's gaze did not waver. Take us in. Ulamenta did not scream. It whispered. The skies were wrong, hazy with unnatural colours, as if the atmosphere itself had forgotten what blue should be. The towers that rose from the planet's surface were twisted. Once grand Necron architecture had collapsed in on itself and been rebuilt at odd angles. Gravity wells pulled upward in places. Light cast shadows that pointed toward the sun, not away from it. And worst of all, there was movement. Thousands of Necron forms stood among the ruins, but they did not stand still. They writhed. Their limbs moved independently. Heads turned without purpose. They stared upward, always upward, as if watching something just behind the fabric of the sky. They're active, Variktan whispered, his hand already on his weapon. They're broken, Anrakel corrected. Some were repaired wrong. Neurological feedback misaligned. No central command structure. They operate in instinctive subroutines. They shouldn't be able to. They shouldn't exist. And then came the voice. Software liquid. Beautiful. I wondered if you would come, brother. Sahek Ra turned. The voice had not spoken aloud. It had risen like vapor inside his mind. From the tallest tower, a figure descended. Not by stair, not by platform. He floated. His body was etched with circuitry, far beyond what any cryptech could construct. His limbs shimmered like glass. His crown was a lattice of living light. His face was smooth, featureless, except for two gleaming emerald eyes. He radiated intelligence, power, madness. You don't remember me, do you? Sahek Ra said nothing. The being drifted closer. I was Velkor, Pharaon of the Shenkanate. We stood together at the gates of the Black Sun when the Citan fell. You saved my life once. You are not Velkor, Sahek Ra said slowly. Number not anymore. The creature tilted its head. I have changed. We all have. Time demands it. You're fractured. We're free. Suddenly Velkor's form split, refracted like a broken mirror. For a moment, he stood in a dozen poses, each slightly different, each in a different position. Then they collapsed back into one, Anrakil recoiled. Time distortion. He's phasing in and out of sequence. He doesn't exist in a single moment. Time is a prison, Velkor said, looking directly at him. We unlocked the cell. You've gone mad. Have I? Or have I awakened while you still dream of purpose? Velkor descended to the cracked black dais where once a dynastic council had stood. The structure was broken, half absorbed into the world's strange geometry. We worshipped eternity. Now we live it. We do not lead legions anymore, Sahekra. We are the legions. Our minds are joined across every iteration of ourselves, every possible path, every unrealized choice. I have seen who I could have been and slain the ones I hated. You've lost your identity. Velkor's voice deepened. I have transcended it. There was no warning. The ground split, and the broken Necron forms around them began to move, not walk, not march. They danced, twitching, jerking, tearing at their own armor as they circled the dais in grotesque harmony. Their movements followed no command. They were fragments, glitches, each one echoing a piece of a mind too shattered to contain itself. Sahekra stared, unmoving, and then softly, Is this what awaits all of us? Anrakil whispered, If we forget, yes. Sahekra stepped forward. I came to rebuild our unity, he said, not to Velkor, but to the sky, to the dead, to himself. But this is not unity. This is entropy wearing memory like a crown. Better entropy than obedience, Velkor said, smiling with a mouth he no longer had. The silent king left us. Why should we follow the path of a coward? I do not follow, Sahekra said. I choose. He raised his hand. His command code struck like lightning. Neural disruptors activated across the surface. Precision pulses burst from the shroud of morning in orbit. Green fire that did not kill, but severed. The corrupted Necrons dropped mid-movement, systems stunned, neural links broken. Velkor howled, a sound like shattering time. Sahekra spoke a final command. Leave this place, burn the surface, collapse the vault. No knowledge escapes this world. Anrakil hesitated. Even Velkor? Sahekra's gaze was glass and silence, especially Velkor. Later, as the fires rose from the broken planet and the shattered reflections of Velkor screamed into the void, Sahekra stood alone in the chamber of memory once more. Varek-Tan watched him quietly. You saw what we could become, he said. Yes, Sahekra answered. We are eternal, but without meaning, we are not gods. We are machines. No, Sahekra said softly. They are machines. We are what remembers we were more. He did not sleep. He did not dream. But deep within the recesses of his mind, something had begun to stir. Doubt, regret, hope. Something even older than war. It was not a beacon that called him. Not a signal. Not a cry. It was a silence. So deep, so absolute. It pulled against the warp of his mind like gravity. In the maps of the old dynasties, it was marked as a dead world, a failed reawakening. The name had long since faded from most records, even Anrakil's. But Sahekra remembered it. Talanek, a sister world, Sarachan-blooded. It had been entrusted to High Regent Femrek during the final years of the war in heaven. He had been a philosopher, not a warrior. One of the few who had argued against biotransference, even as the Citan consumed the stars. And then, before the fall of the Silent King, he vanished. No rebellion, no betrayal, just silence. Now, after 10 million years, that silence whispered again. They made the descent without ceremony. The shroud of mourning did not fire. No resistance was expected. And yet, even Sahekra felt something ancient pressing on the edges of his cognition, like stepping into a mausoleum still filled with the breath of the dead. Talanek was a crystalline world. Its crust was black diamond, layered in sheets of volcanic glass. Mountains rose in symmetrical spires, untouched by erosion, as if frozen mid-creation. And beneath the perfect stillness, an entire Necron dynasty slept, or so he believed. The halls were lit, but no movement stirred, no guards, no weapons, only open doors and cold air. It's impossible, Anrakil murmured. There are power signatures everywhere, active cryo chambers. Over 90% of the dynasty is still in stasis. Awake them, Baraktan growled. No, Sahekra said softly. They chose this. Let them sleep. He walked alone down the central corridor, his footsteps echoing louder than the wind. The tomb's walls were lined with golden black reliefs, depicting the Necrontyr not as conquerors, but as mourners. Images of families, of leaders weeping at the foot of dying sons. There were no depictions of war, only grief. He found Femrek in the core chamber. He had not moved in 10 million years. The stasis field around the High Regent was intact, clear, humming softly, undisturbed. Femrek's body was lean, regal, almost unfinished in its simplicity. No weapons, no crown. His hands were folded across his chest. His eyes were closed, not powered down, sleeping. At first, Sahekra said nothing. Then quietly, almost as a confession, "You were right." Anrakil entered behind him. "He cannot hear you." "No," Sahekra said, "but I can." He stepped closer. "I thought we could endure anything, that we were above the weaknesses of flesh. I led my people into the machine, because I feared death more than I feared forgetting what it meant to be alive." He placed his hand on the edge of the stasis field. "I made myself into a weapon, and I have lived long enough to bury every reason I was ever forged for." Varektan's voice crackled behind him. "If he believed what you say, why did he not resist? Why didn't he fight?" "Because resistance is also memory." Sahekra turned to face him. He did not fight. He mourned. He saw the future we were building and chose to be still. Anrakil's expression darkened. "That is not nobility. That is cowardice. We need him. We need this dynasty. The war has already begun, even if no one is yet willing to say it." Sahekra shook his head slowly. "Number, this place is not a weapon. It is a tomb, not of bodies, but of hope." And then something unexpected happened. Femrek stirred. Not much, just the slightest twitch of the hand. But the stasis field had not failed. He had moved within it. Anrakil reeled back. "That's impossible. He's aware while entombed." "No," Sahekra whispered. "He never went to sleep. He has watched everything, for 10 million years." The implications were staggering. To remain conscious within stasis was a torment beyond imagining. Time stretched to the breaking point, each second an eternity. Most Necron systems were designed to suppress thought during long-term suspension, but Femrek had disabled that. He had chosen to suffer through every year, every war, every silence, every loss. "Why?" Varektan asked, stepping forward. Femrek's eyes opened, slowly. The chamber's light dimmed in respect. No alarms sounded, no fanfare. He spoke with a voice like polished obsidian being ground under slow pressure, because someone had to remember. The room went still. Sahekra stepped forward, his voice reverent. "You heard the screams, the wars, the madness." "I heard everything," Femrek replied, "but I swore I would not rise again, not to command, not to rule, only to witness. But your dynasty awaits the day worth awakening for." His gaze settled on Sahekra. "And that day is not this one." There was no malice in his voice, only sadness, deep, endless sadness. Sahekra bowed his head. I envy you. Femrek's eyes closed again, and the stasis field solidified. Not a dismissal, a return. They left Talanek in silence. No commands, no new alliances, no victory. Only the knowledge that in a galaxy of rising wars and broken dynasties, one soul had chosen to bear witness, to live the grief no others dared face. As the shroud of morning broke orbit, Sahekra stood again at the viewing port, watching the black crystal world shrink into the void. Variktan approached him. You mourn him? I mourn what I might have been, Sahekra said. Then perhaps there is still something in you that can be saved. Sahekra did not answer, but in the vast silence of space, where no living mind could find peace, the echo of Femrek's words endured. Someone must remember. It began with silence, not the vast, starless kind that filled the void between worlds. This silence was too precise, too perfect, the kind of quiet that hid something. Sahekra knew it the moment they left Talanek's orbit. The shroud of morning moved through the void like a cathedral adrift, her engines low, her systems pulsing with the slow rhythm of thought. But there was something missing. The voices, no status reports, no updates from secondary cryptex, no shifts in Variktan's command legions. He stood in the sanctum void of the command spire, surrounded by flickering star charts, and slowly raised a hand. The vessel responded instantly, glyphs igniting across the floor in cascading Necron script. Dozens of systems were rerouted, shields, void relays, deck security patterns, all under Variktan's seal. Anrakel appeared beside him, called by the same silence. Locked commands, he said at once. Tertiary override layers removed. There's a false hierarchy built into the command lattice. Someone's rerouted fleet control directly through sub-core encryption. Sahekra's voice was iron. Who? Anrakel looked at him. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The war leader stood alone at the helm of the secondary bridge. No guards, no advisors. He wore no crown, only his ancient armor chipped by 1,000 battles, its obsidian plates dull from centuries of disuse. His war scythe rested at his side. He was not hiding. He was waiting. Sahekra entered alone. He did not speak at first, only walked to the edge of the chamber and looked out through the viewport, watching the stars pass. Variktan did not turn. I expected you sooner. You did not cloak your betrayal very well. I didn't need to. A long pause. The silence between ancient brothers. Why? Sahekra asked. Variktan's voice was calm, almost mournful. You have seen what we have become. You have seen what time does to us. You witnessed Velkor, twisted into temporal madness. You saw Femrek, so broken he sealed himself in a tomb of silence for eternity. You know what's coming. I know what we must endure, Sahekra said. Number, you know what you want to rebuild. You want to rebuild something that cannot exist anymore. A Necron empire united in purpose, vision, power. That dream died when the Silent King fled into the void. Sahekra's voice dropped. I never believed in the Silent King. I believed in us. And that, Variktan said, turning finally, is why you will fail. There was no hatred in his tone, only certainty. You are still trying to lead with memory, he said, still clinging to the idea that unity is strength, that we can return to a time before the fracture. But there is no before. There is only the now. The only truth left in this galaxy is power, not loyalty, not vision, not sorrow. Sahekra stared at him. And you would rule by strength? No. Variktan lifted his war scythe. I would follow strength, but you are not strong anymore. For the first time in millennia, Sahekra felt something stir beneath the surface of his mind. Not anger, not pride. Grief. You served me for 10,000 years, he said. I served a king, Variktan replied. Now I see only a mourner. And then the blade came. The war scythe moved in perfect silence, a crescent of green fire arcing towards Sahekra's chest. But he was not unprepared. His hand raised, and the air between them fractured. Reality screamed. A dimensional displacement field surged, catching the strike mid-arc. Variktan staggered as the blade passed through empty void. Sahekra's eyes lit like suns. I did not survive 10 million years to die in the dark, he said. They clashed. Warrior against warlord. Memory against steel. The chamber erupted in shadow light and shrieking sparks. Blades met with the thunder of planets colliding. Sahekra fought without fury, each movement carved in discipline. Variktan fought like a storm. I gave everything to your command, he shouted, each blow hammering like a judgment. And you repaid me with dreams and dust. You chose loyalty, Sahekra answered, deflecting with a pulse of kinetic force. And now you burn it for power. Their weapons locked. For a breathless second, they stared into each other's eyes. Two immortals, two ideologies. Then Sahekra spoke softly. I forgave you before you struck. Variktan hesitated. It was enough. Sahekra's blade spun, not to kill, but to disarm. The war scythe clattered to the floor. Sahekra stepped back. You are not my enemy. Variktan fell to one knee, one hand gripping the edge of the floor. His optics burned with fury. No, he said, I am your shadow, and when you finally collapse under the weight of your illusions, I will be the one who remains. They did not kill him. Sahekra had Unrakel deactivate his command access. Variktan was sealed within a neural stasis vault, suspended in time, not out of punishment, but protection. As Sahekra stood alone again in his throne crypt, the weight of the betrayal pressed into the silence like a nail driven into flesh. There would be more. Others who saw unity as weakness. Others who believed the Necrons had to become something else to survive. But in that moment, Sahekra made his choice. Not for vengeance, for meaning. He activated a new set of coordinates. Far Rim. The edge of known space. An ancient site. A signal long lost. There, he would find the last true fragment of the Sarkhan legacy. Not a brother, not a rival, an heir. It was not marked on any chart. A fragment of dark space, hidden behind quantum fold distortions. Long ago erased from the stellar registry of the Necron dynasties. It had once been called Athanaxis, a minor research moon orbiting the dying, red giant Emcathul, deep in the Far Rim. But now it bore no name, just a signal, faint, corrupted, endlessly repeating. A Sarkhan dynasty identifier, modified, evolved. Not a call, a heartbeat. The shroud of morning drifted through the shattered rings of Emcathul's gravity, well like a ghost ship, drawing closer to a single structure on the moon's surface. A tower of impossible geometry, built from obsidian metal and shifting lattices of light. Unrakel stood beside Sahekra in the command sanctum. There are no records of this facility, he said, not even in the pre-biotransference archives. Whoever built it did so without the knowledge of the Triarch. Someone who wanted to be forgotten, Sahekra murmured. Number someone who wanted you to forget. The tower's surface flickered with arcane wards, older than warp, older than memory. They were not made to keep enemies out. They were made to keep identity in. Inside, the moon was hollow, a single chamber, no guards, no corridors, just an arena of silence, and at its center, a figure. It stood still, arms folded behind its back, staring into a suspended hololith of the galaxy. A swirling map, lit with pulse points and anomalies. The figure was Necron in shape, Saracon in design, but new, unscarred. Its body was too smooth, too precise. No ancient dents, no worn protocols. Sahekra stepped forward, his voice a whisper of ages. "Who are you?" The figure did not turn. "I was born after the fall." "After what fall?" "Yours." Sahekra stilled. "I was constructed under Directive Red Veil, hidden by the last Zarakan cryptex when it became clear your crusade would fail. They poured your memories into the vaults, fragmented and encoded. Trained me with your tactics, your philosophies, your regrets." "Then you are a clone?" "No." The figure finally turned. Its face was his, almost, but the eyes were wrong, brighter, colder. "I am your replacement." The silence that followed was not just shock. It was horror, the existential kind. Anrakel whispered, This is abomination." "No," the figure replied. "This is preservation." Sahekra was a war machine, built to endure the long defeat. But he was not made to see the end. "You speak as if I am gone," Sahekra said, voice low. "You are. The moment you forgave Variktan, the moment you spared Velkor, the moment you looked upon Femrek and did not awaken him. I chose mercy. You chose decay. The clone, this echo, stepped down from the dais. I have read the data of 10 million years. I see the patterns, the weaknesses, the belief in memory, unity, philosophy, all broken. We do not need kings who feel. We need blades that cut." "You're not Necron," Anrakel growled. "You're a weapon pretending to be a mind." But Sahekra stepped forward. "You believe that?" "I know it," the clone said, "and I know what comes next." It extended its hand, and the hololith changed. The stars flared, and a dozen red pulses lit up across the map. These are awakened dynasties, hostile, rogue. They do not seek unity. They seek ascendancy. One has already entered alliance with the Tyranid remnant swarms. Another channels warp corruption into weaponry. The Necrons are not rising, Sahekra. They are splintering. "And what would you do?" Sahekra asked. "I would become Sarek, not his heir, not his legacy, his correction. I would silence the broken, rewrite the failing code, burn the dynasties that no longer remember who we were. And what of the ones who mourn? They will be buried." Sahekra stared at him, not with anger, but with something far older, pity. "I did not survive to become a god. I endured to choose, even if those choices cost me everything." "Then you will die," the clone said. And it turned, stepping back into the shadow of the dais. "I will not fight you, not yet, but I am already beyond you. When your dream fails, as it will, I will be there, not to inherit, to replace." Back on the Shroud of Mourning, Anrakel paced. "We should have destroyed him. That thing." "No," Sahekra said quietly. "It is not time. You saw what it intends. Yes, but we are not ready. Not yet. There are still those who remember. Still fragments of unity. He is the sword. But I..." Sahekra trailed off. "What are you?" Anrakel asked. Sahekra looked into the void. "I am the cost." The ship drifted onward. The stars grew dimmer. The galaxy darkened with war. But somewhere behind them, a clone waited, not dreaming, not mourning, only counting the days. The first signal came from the Hesperid tomb complex, a minor dynasty, long forgotten, tucked into the shallow fold space between the galactic arms, once a proud tributary of the Saracen domain. Now, only a smear on stellar maps, its tomb worlds melted from orbit, their cryptech cores atomized with surgical precision. There was no war, no survivors, only static. Sahek Ra stood before the transmission, his body still, optics dim. The footage, fragmented and unstable, had been scavenged from a derelict scout craft that arrived too late to intervene. What they saw was impossible. A Necron war form, unknown dynasty markings, commanded by no pharaoh, leading soulless legions that bore no crest, no allegiance, no code. At their front, an obsidian figure, unscarred, with a face almost like his. Anrakel's voice trembled with restrained fury. "He's begun." Sahek Ra said nothing. Another world followed, then two more, each one struck with surgical silence. There were no demands, no declarations of war, no efforts to absorb or negotiate. Only deletion, erased from the record. Cities crushed into dust. Memory vaults cored like tumors. It was not conquest. It was editing. "I warned you," Anrakel said sharply, as the bridge of the Shroud of Mourning shifted to red alert. "We should have destroyed him when we had the chance, and become what he believes we already are." Sahek Ra replied, quiet as stone. "We are at war." "No." Sahek Ra turned slowly. "We are in a trial. One I may not survive, but this is not about me." He raised a hand, and the command interface flared to life. "Activate Directive Echo Ruin. Archive every contact with the clone, every system touched by his forces. Mobilize the Tomb Guard of Ifrax, if they still obey. Send encrypted pulses to the Orokin-locked vaults beneath Hadramek. We will not survive this if we fight for worlds." Anrakel's optics narrowed. "Then what do we fight for?" Sahek Ra looked at him. "We fight for what remembers." The next world was Chelontar. Once a garden tomb, its surface was covered in crystalline forest and suspended riverways. It was a shrine to Necronte artistry, a world that had defied millennia of war by preserving not soldiers, but sculptors. In its vaults, entire dynastic lineages had encoded music, light forms and poetry. Translations of Necronte emotion, trapped forever in data spools. The war forms came at night. They did not destroy the planet. They wiped the culture, statues shattered, memory crystals liquefied by neutron charges, data streams overburned and ghosted. No battle, no fire, no collapse, just forgetting. And on the broadcast, for a single second, his face, the clone, the not son, staring into the sky without words, not taunting, just continuing. Variktan awoke screaming. Within his containment cell, stasis fields trembled as the warlord thrashed. Sahek Ra stood in the darkness, watching his former second tear at invisible bonds, mouth open in a howl of rage, or perhaps prophecy. "I saw it," Variktan hissed. "The stars go dark, not in flame, in silence. They vanish, one by one, not because we lost, because we were forgotten." "You saw the future?" Sahek Ra asked quietly. "No." The warlord collapsed to his knees. "I saw the end, and I saw you, watching it." When Sahek Ra walked the halls of his ship now, his name was no longer spoken. Even the loyal few had grown silent. Some feared what approached, others doubted he had the will to stop it. And a few, just a few, had begun to wonder if the clone was right. Anrakel remained, but even his voice was quieter now, measured, uncertain. "You once spoke of unity," he said in private, "of a vision beyond mere survival, but your silence is becoming a shadow, and shadows don't build empires." "I don't seek to build," Sahek Ra replied. Anrakel's voice cracked. Then what do you want? Sahekra closed his optics for a moment. I want someone to remember us as we were, even if they bury me beside the failure. The next world was Orenvar, an old capital, one of Sahekra's first conquests, long before the fall. There, in its memory vaults, were the faces of his people before the metal, the names of every child lost to the wars against the old ones. The clones struck it without pause. It was defended, fortified, fully awake. But none of that mattered. The defenders were not killed. Their minds were rewritten, not erased, corrupted, infected with false memory strands, beliefs that Sahekra had never existed, that Sarikhan had been a myth, that all Necrons rose under a single will, the new Sarek. By the time Sahekra's fleet arrived, the entire planet had changed its glyphs. His sigils were burned, his statues repurposed, refaced. He had not been defeated. He had been replaced. And for the first time in 1,000 years, Sahekra did not speak. He simply turned away and wept, not with tears, but with silence. He had never bowed to Oricon, not once. Even when the diviner had walked among the silent court, wrapped in chronowards and impossible geometries, whispering futures like venom into the ears of kings, even when Oricon had warned him of this. Now, 10 million years later, Sahekra stood again at the edge of Urubor Kesh, the time tomb, the place where the stars refused to move, and echoes of the past lived inside stone. Anrakel stood at his side, eyes locked on the great labyrinth. Nothing here moves in a straight line, he said. Time never does, Sahekra replied. He stepped forward alone. The tomb defied logic. Corridors folded in on themselves. Doorways opened into moments. Ghosts of old selves flickered in the walls. Shades of Sahekra from before, during, after. In one hallway, he passed a version of himself still made of flesh. In another, a version crumbling to dust. He did not speak to them. He walked through time with purpose. At the center of the chamber, upon a throne of inverted gravity, Oricon waited, unaged, unchanged, uninterested. You have come late, the diviner said, his voice curling backward through space, arriving before his lips moved. I had no need of prophecy, Sahekra answered, until the past became the only way forward. Oricon's many eyes flickered in layered directions. And what do you seek? Power, victory, a name forgotten? No, Sahekra said. I seek what came before. A silence unfolded, then laughter, like metal breaking under pressure. You would open that vault? Oricon asked, bemused. You would look into the wound that made the Necrontyr what they are. The secret even Sarek buried beneath biotransference and myth. Sahekra said nothing. You were always faithful, Oricon sneered. Even when you doubted, you obeyed. You called the machine a weapon, but worshipped the empire it forged. And now you return, broken, afraid of your own shadow. I am not afraid of him, Sahekra said. No, Oricon agreed. You are afraid of being him. That struck deeper than any blade. I gave up everything, Sahekra said, stepping closer, voice sharp as obsidian. My body, my people, my name. I walked through 10 million years of silence so that something of us might endure. I watched us turn into parasites, or tyrants, or monuments to failure. And now even the shadow I left behind wants to erase me. So I ask you, Chronomancer, before all this, before the war, before the betrayal, what did we forget? What was stolen from us? Oricon rose. He gestured, and the wall behind him melted, not into metal, but into time. A window, through it, the Necrontyr homeworld, not as it was in memory, scarred and dying, but as it had been long, long ago, alive, sun still young, skies not yet sick, children running in the dust, cities of light, hope. Before the curse, Oricon said, we were not warriors, we were seekers. We studied the stars, not to conquer, but to belong. Before the Satan came, before the wars, before Sarek. Sahikrar's voice was ash. Why was it buried? Because pain is easier to carry than loss, Oricon said. And Sarek needed pain. A people who remembered what they used to be would never have followed them into the furnace. The image faded. Only the dark remained, and a single phrase burned in Sahikrar's mind. You were not built to conquer. You were built to understand. He fell to his knees, not in worship, in grief. So much lost, not just bodies, not just empires, but the reason why they ever mattered. When he emerged, Anrakel saw the change. You found him. I found us. They stood at the edge of the tomb for a long time. Then Sahikrar spoke a name not heard since before the war in heaven, before Sarek, before the betrayal, the name of their first civilization, the code buried in their oldest architecture, the dream that came before immortality, and with it he sent a signal, not a rally, not a war cry, a reminder, a phrase translated through the stars. We were more than death. The clone would hear it, deep in his stolen vaults, in the silence between systems, a phrase not meant for him, but one he could not ignore, and for a moment, just one. He hesitated, not in fear, but in memory, and memory, as Sahikrar now knew, was the most dangerous weapon of all. There was no response, no fanfare, no sudden unification, no banners raised to a forgotten king, just silence. And then, one by one, the tombs began to open. On the broken ark world of Varamek, the lights returned to a vault long thought dead. Inside, the cryptech council of the dust-fused lineage awoke from forced stasis, eyes lit not by command, but recognition. They spoke in old tongue. They wept, in the way only beings without lungs could. Their voices static cracked, repeating one phrase across 1,000 relays. He remembers. On Thranduil, an entire dynasty paused its civil war. 2 pharaohs, locked in endless looped combat over a shard world's control, stopped mid-blade. For the first time in 7,000 years, they did not strike. They listened, not because they believed, because they knew the voice. Across the galactic fringe, in dead space, echoes of the signal drifted into derelict Necron fleets, tomb ships whose minds had faded into dormancy, orbiting dead stars. And when they heard Sahikrar's memory, they turned around. Not all reactions were faithful. On the 13th vault of Shakarat, a technomancer known as Nerosh Vek received the signal, processed it, and immediately purged it from his data cores. He declared Sahikrar corrupted, his signal a vector of regression. The future does not live in memory, he told his court. It lives in control, in order. We must become something new. And then he opened communication with the clone. He bowed, not in servitude, in recognition. I will aid your purge, Neroshvek said, so long as when you rebuild, my code is carved into the foundation. The clone did not speak. He simply transmitted a single command glyph. One word. Approved. Sahikrar watched it unfold. On the bridge of the Shroud of Mourning, Anrakel fed him relays from across the stars, some dynasties lighting beacon flares in the old formation codes, others shifting their cryptic dialects back to ancient Sharakan script. Even war forms, those without self, began echoing old battle patterns. Not programmed, remembered. "They're returning," Anrakal whispered. "Not all," Sahekra replied, "but enough." The silence stretched, and then, enough to lose honorably. Later, Sahekra stood alone before the memory vault. It had not been opened since the war in heaven. Inside, fragments of Necrontyr life before the curse, before the biotransference, before the soul became metal and the self became circuitry. He accessed the first shard. A face appeared, a young woman, his daughter, before the change. Her eyes bright with curiosity, skin weathered by the homeworld's dying sun. She spoke softly, in a dialect even older than Sarachan. "You always believed we were more than dust, even when the stars said otherwise." He did not fall. He did not collapse. He simply closed the vault, turned, and said, "It's time." In deep space, far from any known routes, the clone stood before a black stela, an obelisk of data, pulsing with forgotten protocols. Around him, the fleet waited, silent, unquestioning, the obedient future. But the clone did not smile. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The signal had changed things. He had expected resistance. He had not expected memory to fight back. He turned to Neroshvek. "Begin the culling," he said at last. "Those who answer the call of the past must be erased, permanently. We will give them no chance to breathe myth into function." "And Sahekra," the technomancer asked. The clone hesitated. Then, "He will come. Let him. The war ends not in fire, but in choice. He will make his final one soon." Back aboard the Shroud of Mourning, Sahekra summoned what remained of his loyal fleet. His voice echoed through the relays like thunder soaked in grief. "This is not a war of conquest," he said. "It is not even a war of survival. This is a war for the right to be remembered, for the right to have meant something." He raised his blade, not for battle, but for the dead. "Let this be our final act, not of vengeance, not of fear, but of defiance. Let us fail gloriously if we must, but let history know we chose." And across the void, stars began to burn with returning life. Not many, but enough. The burning of Dracorith was not recorded. No transmission escaped. No tomb ship survived. Only an afterimage, scorched into the warp's edge like a scream without air. When Sahekra arrived, there was no world left, only glass and silence. They had answered his call. A minor dynasty, poets, philosophers. Their archive of pre-biotransference Necrontyr history had been unmatched. Now, all gone. And at the system's edge, drifting. One fragment of black metal, the clone's crest, left behind not as a taunt, as a warning. Sahekra stared at it through the command glass. "He's begun the purges," Anrakal said grimly. "No more memory, no more rebellion. Only the doctrine of the self-made god." "He's not a god," Sahekra whispered. "He thinks he is." "No," Sahekra said. "He thinks I failed. And if I die without proving him wrong, then I have." Far from Dracorith, on a planet whose name had not been spoken since the war in heaven, a pulse began. The tomb world was dark, not ruined, forgotten, buried in layered encryptions so ancient even the Silent King's recall beacons could not find it. A failsafe built by cryptex who had loved not power, but lineage. Deep in its core, a sarcophagus awakened, not from command, but from bloodline verification. The stasis tomb hissed open. Light flickered. A figure stepped forth, smaller than most Necron lords, simpler in frame. But its eyes, its optics, were older than its body. They blinked once, then locked onto a rising glyph, Sahekra, active. A voice echoed through the vault. It was the last recording of a Sarkhan cryptech known only as the Linekeeper. If he returns and the world burns, awaken the seed. Let not the fire consume all that came before. The figure spoke, for the first time in eons. I am not him, but I remember him. And it walked into the light. On the shroud of morning, the old Necron lords gathered. They were not many. Most had chosen silence, or alliance with the clone, or oblivion. But those who remained had answered Sahekra's signal, not because they believed in his power, but in his grief. He had not promised them empire. He had only promised that they would not be forgotten. We cannot face his fleet head-on, one of the lords said. We won't, Sahekra replied. He is trying to erase meaning. We must become something he cannot erase. What's that? Asked another. Sahekra turned. A myth. Elsewhere, the clone prepared his final purge. His fleet, 20,000 ships strong, had already sterilized half a dozen responding dynasties. Those that accepted his rewritten code were allowed to live. Those that clung to the past were unmade, but the signal from the forgotten tomb reached him, and in it, a voice he did not recognize. I am not Sahekra, but I carry his line. For the first time, the clone froze. Not in anger, in something dangerously close to confusion. He turned to Neroshvek. There were no heirs. There were none recorded, the cryptech answered. But genetic redundancy, especially among early Sarkhan cryptechs, is unpredictable. You cannot overwrite what you didn't know existed. The clone said nothing. And then, for the first time, he sent a signal, not to erase, to invite. The seed construct arrived at the edge of neutral space. Sahekra met it alone. He expected a soldier. Instead, it was young. By Necron standards, impossibly so. Perhaps no more than 2,000 years past awakening. Its armor bore the old family crest, but in a form Sahekra didn't recognize. A hybrid, half echo, half innovation. Who made you? Sahekra asked. The ones who remembered, the ones you left behind. Then why now? Because something worse than forgetting has arrived, the construct said. Correction, and I will not let your failure become his foundation. Sahekra studied the being. I do not deserve your loyalty. You don't have it, the seed said. I don't follow you, but I remember you. That's enough. A long silence passed. Then, Sahekra whispered, Will you fight? No, the seed replied, but I will test him. Back on the clone's flagship, a response arrived. Encrypted, ancient. The voice of the seed, broadcast into the heart of his fleet. I do not come as king, nor son, nor soldier. I come as mirror. If you are what you claim, then let us speak, not of who commands, but of what remains. The clone paced for the first time in memory, not out of anxiety, out of uncertainty. Something was unraveling, not his plan, not his strategy, his certainty. And the only thing more dangerous than rebellion was a question that refuses to be answered. In the void between stars, fleets began to converge. The war would not be stopped, but somewhere between memory and steel, a final confrontation loomed, not just between Sahekra and the clone, but between two futures, one of control, one of remembrance, and neither would leave the galaxy unchanged. The battlefield was chosen, in silence. No banners, no transmissions, just a pause in time, in a dead system without light, a worldless, starless mass drifting between galactic arms. At its heart, two ships came to a halt, the Shroud of Mourning, and the flagship of the clone, the Empty Crown. No weapons were fired, No fleets moved. Only two figures descended, Sahek rode, and the being made in his image. They met alone, in the void. No guards, only gravity fields and memory. For a long time, they said nothing. Then, the clone broke the silence. You called yourself the Cost. Sahek Ra nodded. The clone stepped forward. But you never paid it. Sahek Ra's eyes did not glow. He had dimmed them. What do you think I've done, if not bleed for millennia? You survived, the clone hissed. That was your crime. You endured, but you never transcended. You watched the galaxy rot and did nothing. You preserved history but never corrected it. You are a monument to a dying language, not a leader. I did not endure to rule, Sahek Ra said. I endured so someone would still remember what we were. And that is why you must be erased, the clone snapped. Because remembrance is weakness. Nostalgia is a chain. We were not meant to mourn ourselves. We were meant to become something more. What then? Sahek Ra asked. You destroy dynasties, burn vaults, rewrite minds, and yet you still carry my face. You are a hollow echo pretending to be the future. No, the clone said, quiet now. I am not your echo. I am your proof that everything you built, your ideals, your mercy, your unity, led only to failure. He extended a hand, not to attack, to offer. Stand down. Let me carry it forward. Let me do what you could not. Sahek Ra looked at him. For a moment, pity flickered through the void. Then, you misunderstand me. I am not here to stop you because I believe I will win. I am here to remind the galaxy that it matters we tried, that we chose. Even if the stars die, even if our names are lost, I would rather fall with meaning than rise with none. The clone lowered his hand. Then you are not a king. No, Sahek Ra agreed. I am a tombstone. Back aboard the Shroud of Mourning, the final alignments began. The loyal dynasties, those few that had answered the call, formed a ragged crescent in orbit over the forgotten system. Their ships were ancient, undergunned, fractured by millennia, but they held formation. Not because they thought they would survive, but because they remembered why they had fought. At Sahek Ra's side stood Anrakel, and beside him, the seed construct, the last true heir of Zarakan, born of a lineage thought lost, but now awakened to become witness. They will not spare us, Anrakel said, voice heavy. No, Sahek Ra agreed. They may not even remember us. Sahek Ra turned to the seed. That's not the point. The young construct nodded. I'll carry the name, even if only in silence. And somewhere deep within the ship, the memory vaults opened, not to be guarded, to be broadcast. Every file, every image, every memory Sahek Ra had saved across 10 million years, released into the void, into time, not for victory, but for legacy. And on the clone's flagship, Nerosh Vek watched the transmission flicker across the stars. They've opened their hearts, the cryptek said. They're not waging war, they're confessing. The clone said nothing. He watched the data stream like a funeral flame. He saw the old faces, old cities, the laughter of Necrontyr children before the sun sickness, the tombs before they were tombs. The moment his own line, Sahek Ra's line, first stepped into immortality and began to forget who they were. He turned away. For a moment, he hesitated. Then softly, burn it. And across his fleet, the purge began. Above the dead system, lights flared. Starships met in silence without fanfare. The fleets collided. The final war had begun. But even as the fire ignited across the void, Sahek Ra knew the war wasn't for territory. The war wasn't for control. The war was for the right to be remembered. The shroud of mourning was dying, torn open along its spinal core, flame venting into vacuum like blood into salt water. The fleet above had collapsed into chaos, squadrons fragmented, tomb ships dissolving mid-formation, protocols spiraling out of control. And at the center of it, Sahek Ra boarded the empty crown, alone. No escorts, no fleet, no backup. He came not as conqueror, but as accuser. The halls of the flagship were pristine, cold, quiet, every inch engineered for precision. No inscriptions, no statues, no sigils, no history. He passed silent war forms who did not move, not because they were afraid, because they had no permission to. At the apex of the throne spire, the clone waited, still, perfect, unchanging. Sahek Ra stepped into the throne chamber, footsteps echoing against metal older than stars. "You came unarmed," the clone said. "I came as your past," Sahek Ra answered. "You are not my past. I am what you are trying to forget." The clone stood, not like a man, but like a judgment. "You should have let go. The Empire is dead. The gods are dead. Even the king you loved cast you aside." "I know," Sahek Ra said, "but I will not die as one who agreed." The clone tilted his head. "You think this is about philosophy? This is about survival. The Necrontyr are gone. The Necrons are dying. The galaxy belongs to those who adapt, who shed weakness. I have removed the memory of loss. I have written over suffering. I have made us pure." "No," Sahek Ra said. "You've made us hollow." And then the clone moved, faster than logic. His blade came from the ether, a phase-edged monomatter spike, designed not to cut flesh, but to unwrite identity. Sahek Ra caught it with his own. The duel was not elegant. It was not operatic. It was grief incarnate, blow against blow, not to kill, to deny. The clone struck like inevitability. Sahek Ra countered like memory refusing to die. They said nothing, because all words had already been spent. Until, at last, the clone drove Sahek Ra back, forced him against the central stela, etched with a single phrase in high Saracen script. "I am what was left." "You could have ruled with me," the clone hissed. "You could have let the past be buried, but you chose martyrdom." "No," Sahek Ra whispered. "I chose to matter." And then the seed arrived. Through a side door of the collapsing ship, surrounded by flame and broken war forms, the young construct stepped in, and everything froze, because both of them saw it now. The seed was not just a witness. He was both of them, legacy and potential, memory and vision, the face of the first Saracen bloodline, but with a voice neither of them could predict. The clone turned to him. "Join me. I will make you eternal. I will make you perfect." Sahek Ra turned too. "Don't choose me. Just remember why you were born." The seed stood in silence, watching two futures die in front of him, and then he raised his hand and shut down the core. The empty crown ruptured from within. The seed had activated the ancient failsafe hidden in the Saracen core. The blood key, a protocol built into the oldest vessels of the dynasty, locked to lineage beyond even the Silent King's access. The ship folded in on itself, stasis fields imploding, memory cores detonating. And at the heart of it, the clone screamed, not in pain, but in refusal. He reached for the seed. "Don't forget me." But Sahek Ra pulled him back, locked arms, and with the last of his strength, held him in place. "I never could." Then the chamber collapsed, and the stars screamed with the birth of silence. Above, the war ended. No command, no surrender, just stillness. Sahek Ra was gone, the clone erased. But the seed survived, drifting in an escape pod of crystal data, carrying the last full archive of Saracen memory in his chest. The loyal fleets, fragmented and stunned, began to fall into orbit around him, not to obey, to listen. On the edge of the galaxy, a signal went out. No fanfare, no banners, just a single phrase, carried through subspace in a voice not yet broken. He's gone. But I remember. They buried him in silence. No sarcophagus, no endless crypt. Just a drift pod, sealed in obsidian, sent into the black between galaxies, where no suns shine, where no gods watch. The final resting place of Sahekra, the old war machine, the one who chose to remember. The seed stood at the edge of the launch bay, alone now, surrounded only by the memory walls, etched in living crystal with the recovered archives from the Saracen vaults. Behind him, the fleets had scattered. Some to rebuild, some to fade, some to forget all over again. That was the price of free thought. There were no chains to force remembrance, only the quiet possibility that someone, somewhere, would care enough to ask, who were we before the war? Anrakel was dead, his core ruptured in the final clash above the empty crown, lost when he had rerouted power to cover the seed's escape. But the seed had preserved his last memory cube. In it, Anrakel's voice said, "We cannot defeat forgetting, but we can outlive it if we leave behind something that matters. Not a war, not a weapon, a story." And so the seed became a scribe. He did not raise armies. He raised archives. Worlds that were once tombs became monuments. Silent, shimmering libraries suspended in orbit, filled with everything the clone had tried to erase. The joys of the old Necrontyr, their failures, their songs, their cities, their longing to be more than dust. Even the clone's voice was preserved, not as doctrine, as warning, because forgetting a monster was how monsters returned. The seed travelled alone, world to world, speaking only when asked. He did not preach. He did not lead. He only told the tale of a warrior who remembered, of a shadow that sought to replace him, of a war not for power, but for the right to be seen. Some listened, some turned away, but every time, when the story ended, he would offer a final phrase, unchanged, unglorified, unshaken. He died not to win. He died so you could choose. 10,000 years passed. The galaxy changed again. The Imperium fractured. The Tyranids came. The warp screamed. The stars turned red. The old dynasties of the Necrons flickered like candlelight in wind. Some rekindled, others gone. But in the void, drifting just beyond the reach of light, one world remained untouched. A black planet with no name, no armies, only a single monument. It bore no statue, no symbol, only an inscription in Necrontyr glyph script, half faded. He was the last to kneel, the first to fall, and the only one who remembered. And below it, smaller, etched in the seed's own hand, we were more than death. Let us be more than silence. The stars do not weep, they only fade. But somewhere deep in the dead light between galaxies, a signal still drifts. Not a warning, not a call to war. Just a voice, telling a story, waiting for someone to listen.